Welcome to week number 7, everyone. Can you believe it? We are 2 weeks away from the end of this term, and we've got a lot going on this week, so let's take a look. All right, last week, what did you learn about? You learned about how traits are inherited. We looked at Mendelian genetics and how dominant recessive traits work. We made Punnett squares to show how gametes can be put together from different parents in order to make all the different types of offspring. We learned about patterns of inheritance, such as complete dominance and incomplete dominance. We didn't have any sex-linked traits or anything like that, so there are other patterns of inheritance, but we got into a few different ones. So that shows you how traits are inherited in organisms. And so then the traits that are manifested in those organisms determine what type of organism they are, right? And then that leads us to species. So organisms that have similar traits and can reproduce successfully are called a species. So we're getting into species now and how species interact with different species and also with the environment. So this is more the environmental science section of Bio 120. So this week, what are we learning about? Relationships in biology. For example, food webs. So who eats whom out there in the environment? And how are these different species related to each other when you're talking about who consumes what and who consumes whom? So I'll talk about that more in just a minute. Population dynamics. How do populations exist? What happens when you increase the birth rate? What happens when you increase the death rate? How does the population sustain itself over a period of time? What's the carrying capacity of an environment? And that means how many individuals of a species will that environment sustain? My Department of Natural Resources here in South Carolina does counts all year long for deer to manage the deer population because there are basically no natural predators of deer in our state, and so hunters are allowed to cull the population in order to keep those numbers down because we can have too many deer and they can be harmful to the environment. And also demographics, where you study cohorts or different sections of a population in order to figure out things about them. And you know some of these cohorts, the baby boomers, for example. I'm one of the baby boomers. There's the Great Generation, they call it, from World War II, around World War II. There are the millennials. There's Generation Z. So we know some of these terms having to do with the human population, but of course we can do this for all different types of species. So we'll be studying a little bit about that. Okay, so what is due this week? Lab 7-1. That's the drawing of your food web. And I'm going to show you a picture in just a second. So you're going to draw out a food web and answer some questions about food webs. That won't take you terribly long. This assignment has to do with the Everglades and organisms that are alive in the Everglades. And they're very specific ones that are listed out for you, and you're going to show some relationships between at least 10 of those different species. Okay, Lab 7-2 on carrying capacity and demographics. This is a long lab. The instructions tell you that this is going to take you over 3 hours to do. So I'm just saying, it took me that long. So this is going to take you a while. You can complete this in steps if you want to. And one section you don't do. Activity 4, leave out. Do not do it. I'm not grading it. I'm not even looking at it. So don't do it. But you do have activities 1, 2, and 3. They are going to take you some time. I'm going to save you some time because I'm going to help you by telling you what you need to graph after you collect all your data from the 3 activities that you have in this lab. For activity 1, you graph all 4 lines, all of the 4 R values. Graph all 4. That will not take long. That data table is very easy. Then you've got some data tables for activity 2. There are 2 of those. And you do a set of calculations. And so as you look across the columns, right, one after the other, you're doing some calculations. And the point is to get to that last column called population growth rate. That is the last column. Okay, so when it asks you to graph the data, you're going to graph on the y-axis population growth rate versus the time interval, which it will be on the x-axis. You don't graph all the rest of the data in that data table, and this is for the data tables 2A and 2B, okay, because you're doing some comparisons between the data sets. So population growth rate versus time interval. That's what you're graphing, 2 graphs for activity 2. For activity 3, survivorship per 1,000 on the y-axis, y vertical, versus years and decades on the x-axis, that's the horizontal axis. You're going to have 2 lines on this one graph area because you're choosing 2 cohorts. You're choosing males and females, or different time periods, the 1900s versus the 1800s. You're choosing the cohorts. So there are 2 different cohorts that you're choosing, and there will be 2 lines on that graph area. Okay, there's also an activity. The activity 3 has to do with going out and looking at gravestones. Oh my goodness, that's going to take you forever. Just use the gravestone cards that are in your biology lab kit, okay? But if you want to go look at a graveyard, go ahead. It's just going to take you forever because you need a couple hundred of those. Yeah. So look at your gravestone cards. That's the easiest thing to do. Just be sure and look at them before you start using them because they're organized, which is kind of weird to me, but they are organized, and they're organized by, like, babies are in one section. So anyway, look at the gravestone cards before you even start using them. And if you want to, you can mix them up, but just look at them first. Okay, I want to explain one thing that happened back in the 1990s to tell you something about populations and population dynamics. Back in the early 1990s, in 1993, in fact, some young men and women were dying in the 4 corners of the United States from a very fast-acting type of pneumonia. The 4 corners are the 4 states: Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And so you see this is sort of a desert sort of area in here. And some of these were Native Americans who were passing away. And it was all young people. And they got a pneumonia, and then they would die within a day or 2 from this pneumonia. And it just popped up all of a sudden, and people were dying. And so we started researching this to try to figure out what in the world was going on, because obviously there was something that was happening that was different. And as the epidemiologists were studying this, they came across this old Native American folklore that said, if there are spring rains, then young men will die. They came across that and they thought, that's kind of interesting. So evidently Native Americans knew something about what is going on right now, but we have no idea what is happening. So what they discovered was a hantavirus, a new hantavirus that we had not seen in people before, but it definitely could have been here as an endemic infection for decades or centuries even. So they found a new hantavirus that was responsible for killing these young people. And they said, well, where is this hantavirus coming from? How are these people becoming infected? And in fact, they figured out that it was coming from mice. And here's the connection between the Native American folklore and what was happening. That spring, in this sort of arid area of the United States, there had been good spring rains. And so the plants produced lots and lots of seeds and nuts. And so then what did that mean for the mouse population? The mouse population exploded. And there were lots and lots more mice because there was a lot of food source. And the mice were moving into areas where people normally lived. They were getting inside houses and barns and everywhere, and they were just basically taking over. And the mice were carrying hantavirus, and they would leave it behind in their urine and feces. So people were cleaning up after all these nasty mice that were everywhere. And when they would sweep, or when they would try to clean up, these viruses would get into the air. People would breathe it in. And if you were a young, strong, healthy adult with a very aggressive immune system, your immune system attacked these viruses and filled up your lungs with fluid, and you could die very rapidly. So it's a kind of interesting connection between Native American folklore and their understanding of the environment and what actually happened in 1993 in the four corners of the U.S. We have seen it since then. It was at a national park. I want to say Yellowstone National Park, in some of the cabins. Not sure if that's the right park, but I think it was. So we have seen it come up again. So that's just an example of what happens in populations and how the environment can affect populations. Okay, I wanted to mention this about food webs. I told you I was going to tell you something else. This is how you draw a food web. So you see an alligator here at the top. Alligators love to eat a lot. They eat turtles. They eat bass fish. They eat egrets if they can catch them, especially baby ones. But I want you to notice how the arrows are drawn. The arrows are drawn from the turtle toward the alligator, because what you're doing when you're drawing out a food web is showing the energy flow. So the energy flow is flowing from the turtle, who is the food, into the alligator. Okay, so that's the way that you draw the arrows in a food web. Just think about how the energy is flowing. You'll also have some plants from the Everglades, some sawgrass and some things like that. So you won't just have animals. You have lots of different choices of species there. This will not be hard. Just draw your arrows in the right direction. All right, also for week number 7, I told you how much time it's going to take you to do those labs. You also have to turn in your final project. So this is in final form. It needs to be a PowerPoint presentation or something similar to a PowerPoint presentation with slides, 7 to 10 slides. I tell you this down at the bottom here. You absolutely need to use images. So show me your graphs. Show me pictures of what you're talking about. If you're doing an air pollution project, show me smog. Just include graphics to make your presentation interesting, as if you were presenting this to a whole group of people. Don't forget to include the information that you've been looking up from your sources, because this helps to prove your case, basically, if other people have found this phenomenon to be true also. So don't forget to include that. Include a reference section. This doesn't have to be counted in the 7 to 10 slides. You can put speaker's notes on there. I will read those if you have those. You will have completed your experiment by the time you turn this in and made a whole presentation. You need to have some data. You need to have something to present to me that here, this is what I found. Okay? And if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me and I will help straighten you out, help get you something that makes sense. I put a link, and I will put a link in the announcements to the guidelines and the rubric for this, because this is a big grade. It is 200 out of your 1,000 points. So make sure you do a really good job on this. Use your milestones 1 and 2 to complete your presentation. They are included in this, not in that outline form. Make sure it looks like a presentation. It's written out, and that you have your data in graph or table form at least. And make sure you present your data correctly. If you're not sure whether your data needs to be in the form of a line graph or a bar graph, please email me and I will help you with that, okay? And make sure you have a conclusion. So what did you figure out about this? What conclusion did you come to? All right? And like I said, if you have any trouble, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always looking at my email. I will answer you back just as soon as I possibly can. And one last thing that I wanted to remind you of, especially if this is your first term at SNHU, the end of the semester is the end of the semester. Everything has to be turned in for this term by midnight, Sunday, December the 20th. You cannot turn in anything at 12:01. If you do, you can't put it in the course. And don't ask me to either, because I can't. I can't put anything in except grades. So you have to have everything in by Sunday night. Please remember that. Even anything that you needed to catch up with during this term, it all has to be in by Sunday night. Okay, I hope you have a great week. It's going to be really busy for you. I know that. But we're here at the end of the term. We are almost there. Just keep sticking with it and you can get through it. If you have any questions or if you need any help, there's my email address, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I am here to help you and I'm here to support you. So just let me know if there's anything that I can do for you. I hope you have a wonderful week.